former Senator Jim Talon from the great state of Missouri joins me. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Doing great, Hugh.
I have to spring some breaking news on you for a reaction. This published in the Wall Street Journal less than an hour ago. China and Cuba have reached a secret agreement for China to establish an electronic eavesdropping facility on the island in a brash new geopolitical challenge by Beijing to the U.S. An eavesdropping facility in Cuba, roughly 100 miles from Florida, would allow Chinese intelligence services to scoop up electronic communications throughout the southeastern United States, where many military bases are located, and to monitor U.S. ship traffic. Officials familiar with the matter said China has agreed to pay cash-strapped Cuba several $billions to allow it to build the eavesdropping station. Now, Senator Talent, we did that for years with the Soviets. I'm sure we ought to go in and do it with Vietnam if they'll let us do it, but what's your reaction to that headline?
Oh, I'm not surprised at all, Hugh. Their ambitions are global, and they're establishing a global network of bases. You know, they're on the Horn of Africa in Djibouti. They're negotiating for the western coast of Africa. We're going to see Chinese ships in the Atlantic. They have a satellite, or they have a radar facility, I believe, in Argentina. So this doesn't surprise me at all. They're going global. Their ambitions are global, and we need to be prepared to deal with them globally.
Well, despite the efforts of Chairman Gallagher, despite the efforts of you and Ambassador O'Brien, I just don't think people quite get. I just got back from my Harvard reunion where we had a panel with a Harvard law professor, a Harvard Business School professor, a Harvard undergraduate professor, all Sinologists, and they all blamed Donald Trump for Xi Jinping's behavior. I really couldn't believe it, Senator. It's like otherworldly in academia right now.
Yeah, and I heard your interview with Robert. Well, these universities have a stake in believing that China isn't aggressive and that if we just engage them and are nice, they'll be fine. I mean, Robert referred to the billions and billions of dollars these universities get. Now, I'm sorry, you. I mean, you should be charitable. I don't have to be. In research contracts, not to mention the tuition, because the students from China, they pay the full price.
Full boat,
and
yep.
So, who is it who said it's hard to get a man to believe something if his salary depends on him not believing it?
Huh. Well, what is the appropriate response? I mean, I don't see any leadership out of the Biden White House. In fact, I see Lloyd Austin chasing around Chinese defense minister who won't talk to him. I see Secretary Blinken begging for a meeting. I know we sent Bill Burns, who's a competent guy, to a secret meeting in Beijing. I don't know that there's anything to be negotiated here, Jim.
Well, I agree. You've been commenting on this, and I think appropriately so. They made a decisive turn towards appeasement. They would call it engagement. I had hopes early in the administration. They had some really good people at DOD. That was the bastion of China hawks, if you will. But it looks to me like the engagers and the appeasers have won out. And I think part of the reason is they're not prepared to do what you need to do if you really recognize the China threat. And therefore, they refuse to recognize it.
What do you want to hear Republican candidates say about China? I mean, what is the dividing line here? Not just will you defend Taiwan, but what else do they? Do you know, at this seminar, it's off the record, so I can't tell you anything, but I can tell you since it wasn't mentioned, no one brought up the Uyghurs. It's like covering Nazi Germany in the 30s and not mentioning Jews.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. In an in-depth interview, and the kind you do, I'd like to see the Republican candidates talk about how they are going to compete or deal with China across a range of domains. So that's going to include economic, it's going to include diplomatic, it's going to include disrupting their narrative, going after them on human rights issues, as well as, of course, as the military issues. I think what I want to see them lead with, though, if the question permits it, is what they're going to do to strengthen short-term deterrence in the South China Sea. Because if we don't do that, the balloon could go up in Taiwan, and we do not want that to happen.
Well, the Gallagher Committee did put out, and it was bipartisan. It was passed by a voice vote, 10 things for Taiwan, including anti-ship missiles. Do you think we'll do any of that?
Yeah, I think we're doing it in part because Congress is pushing so hard for it. But the problem there is the Department of Defense is not moving with the urgency and the energy. That, for example, it moved when Gates took over and we had the surge. You remember that with the MRAPs,
Yes.
and they can move quickly when they want to move. When you have high-level political authority really pushing and focusing, and I'm not seeing that at all. And I don't know that Congress can change that. I mean, they can't go down and occupy the E-ring, you know?
So, Senator, last question. It looks like they're getting ready to indict former President Trump on boxes of documents. I think this is a terrible thing for the country. What do you think?
I think it's bad for the country, but I understand the political logic from their standpoint. They want to energize their base, distract the middle from the problems the Biden administration is not dealing with. And I think they don't mind. They don't mind if Republicans rally around Trump. I mean, I think it's pretty clear the Biden administration would rather run against Trump.
This
is going to help him.
You know, DOJ was never this way. I mean, this is just crazy. And Jack Smith is not the guy to be making decisions of historical world import like this. Jim Talent on Twitter with the Bipartisan Policy Senator. Thank you, as always, Bipartisan Policy Center. Say that 3 times. Follow Jim Talent on Twitter at Jim Talent.